Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. We are starting one more live stream. Now it's 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time, Wednesday, November the 12th. And we are just getting started. As usual, if you are here live with us, you have a priority to suggest the topics of your interest to be discussed live. I'm going to discuss in general lines. I cannot really narrowly review fact patterns based on the Brazilian Bar Association code of ethics. We are not supposed to really provide a consultation without paying and naturally in a public setting, right? So I just ask you to stay with me on this specific aspect that we're going to discuss things in general. But again, you are welcome to suggest a topic of your interest, like if you're facing some issue related to your immigration journey to Brazil or to Portugal, let us know, and we're going to expand the subject here live. And let's take a look if we have any participation so far. I see we have some viewers online already and 2 likes. Thank you for the likes. The likes are good. They help with our business and they help other people just like you find this content. I'm not seeing anything on our chat window, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at the news. And today we're going to be taking a look at Estadão. Estadão is a major Brazilian newspaper, I would guess top 3 newspaper in the country, very traditional, over 150 years of history. And the main headline here says Bolsonaro at Papuda. Would that be shooting yourself on the foot? For Minister Moraes, know what's being discussed in the background, right? And the point here is former President Bolsonaro, he was found guilty of scheming to remain in power, okay? And nowadays he's under house arrest. And there is this whole discussion, right? The Brazilian Supreme Court nowadays is very engaged in politics. So it's not just ruling, by law, but also trying to understand the outcome of its decisions, right? So the idea here is, Bolsonaro is out of the picture. Bolsonaro, which would be a potentially a favorite for the next elections, he is no longer in the game because of the, of the decision by the Supreme Court. And now they're saying, listen, he's, out of the game. Should we really send him to prison or not, right? And then that's the whole discussion over here. Another very interesting headline, the PIX revolution over here, how the system changed in 5 years, the relationship between Brazilians and money, right? And PIX, as many of you probably know, is somewhat similar to Zelle in the United States, but I used to say, years ahead of Zelle, right? Zelle is very limited in the United States, still convenient, right? We actually allow some of our clients to pay when they are hiring our services in Brazil. We allow them to pay through Zelle for convenience, but Pix in Brazil is just something much superior in terms of acceptance. You can use Pix for pretty much every type of payment. And it's interesting that the United States, one of the complaints from President Trump's administration is that Brazil is engaging in competition with other means of payment, right? Particularly the U.S. Credit cards, because naturally, if people can use Pix, which has zero cost to users, they're no longer using credit cards or even debit cards to pay for anything. They want to use Pix. Pix has for individuals, a zero cost. Important to mention, President Lula's administration has tried to tax PIX, right? So they say, well, this thing really works. This thing really works well. Maybe we should create, a fee. But there was almost like, a public, I don't know, people got really upset, and the federal government, had to, backtrack their intentions to tax PIX, right? And nowadays, PIX remains like this, amazing tool that we have in Brazil. Many foreign citizens, once they secure the R&M card, then they are going to be able to have a standard Brazilian bank account, and every single Brazilian account, or let's say standard Brazilian bank account, will have a PIX. It's not like Zelle in the United States. Zelle is still like being adopted by many banks, so it's not like across the board. PIX is present in Brazil across the board, and even like through public services, many times they are going to offer you like a shortcut for you to pay with PIX. So not only from the individual perspective, but also from the government, businesses alike, PIX is really high in terms of adoption. Last comment here on news. People don't forget in Brazil about the United States. It's so interesting. Like every single day, on the front page of every single newspaper, chances are you're going to see something about the United States, right? And here there is a headline addressing that Jeffrey Epstein wrote an email saying that President Trump knew about Epstein crimes, and that's the news headline, and they're basically mirroring what you probably see today in most U.S. newspapers. All right, we have some participation over here. We have Payson. Hello, Payson. Good afternoon from Brazil. Payson is mentioning 4, retirement to residency in Brazil. Can a consulate or embassy in Brazil apostille documents for Americans who are in Brazil? Payson, very interesting question, right? Interesting to note that nowadays there is no standard procedure among the different Brazilian federal police departments. So while in some cases we see documents being legalized by a foreign consulate in Brazil being accepted, in other cases they are not accepted, right? So typically, based on a strategy we like to follow here at the firm, is somewhat like this. Like we say, listen, if you are starting from the get-go, let's get everything fully compliant, okay? Meaning that, let's say, if you are going to present your birth certificate, you're going to have an apostille done in the United States, and have a sworn translation done in Brazil, and then you're going to present this document fully compliant, right? Now, it does happen kind of often that the person is already in Brazil and decided, at that moment in time to apply for some type of residency, and it may be costly to go back to the United States to handle the process, right? So in this case, many times we're going to issue the document in the United States. There is a portal called Vital Check. This portal, is going to issue a new birth certificate. Once the client is using our service, we're going to allow the client to send this document to our Dallas office. Once we receive in Dallas, then we send this document to get an apostille, and then we ship this document along with other documents from other clients to Brazil. And then in Brazil, we handle the sworn translation, right? So even if you are in Brazil, there is this possibility of coordinating those steps in the United States. The route that you're talking about typically works kind of like this. You have a birth certificate on you, or maybe it was in the United States, you asked for a relative to send over to you, Once you get it, you can schedule an appointment with the U.S. consulate, let's say in Rio de Janeiro or São Paulo. You go to this appointment, they are going to get you an affidavit, and you're going to fill out this affidavit, kind of attesting that the document is legit. And typically, a vice consul is going to sign along with you. A vice consul is not vouching for the document. Vice consul is just saying that you show up and attested that the document is legit. So the attestation is yours, and the vice consul basically says, yes, he came over here and said so, okay? And then there's going to be like a seal, a stamp of the United States on this affidavit. The affidavit should be naturally sworn, translated, and then you're going to use this document along with the birth certificate. And then what I can tell you is, sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. All right. So whenever we resort to this route, we're gonna tell the clients, listen, if you want to try it, let's try, but no guarantees. Right now, this is something that I hammer. I need to hammer constantly with our team. Many times we're gonna try, to expedite things for a client. Sometimes we're gonna try some approach that's not guaranteed, and they don't tell the client that's not guaranteed, right? Like, we're trying to help out the client because they didn't do the right thing in the first place. And guess what? When it doesn't work, the client, gets upset. Well, it didn't work. Like, I spent, I don't know how, this much time at the consulate. I spent money. I paid for the certain transition. Now I'm back, to, I don't know, point zero, right? So that's something very important that I share with my team. Listen, whenever we're doing something outside of the, let's say, most straightforward or standard way, you need to tell the client that this is going to be done on a best effort basis, and results are not guaranteed. I think we shouldn't have it to say in immigration. There is a lot of variation in terms of enforcement by the immigration officers, and that's just natural. That's just how it works in other countries, like in the United States. But unfortunately, like, we need to keep hammering that. Otherwise, people get frustrated, and sometimes naturally, right? Like, because they are concerned with their status and there is a timeline and so on. But more, giving you information so you can understand for yourself about those issues. All right, Marisa Navas. Boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Ligados nas suas lives. So good to see you, Marisa, and maybe Ricardo. I hope you guys are watching, participating. Thank you for your support in Portugal. I really appreciate it. User YT. Good afternoon, User YT. How long should it take for my digital nomad visa application to go from sent to under review? I applied 2 weeks ago. User YT, is going to depend on whether you applied through a consulate. If you applied through a consulate, it's going to depend on which consulate you applied. So consulates, timelines, they are all over the place. There is no consistency in handling like the application. If we are talking about filing in Brazil, then there is more consistency because every single digital nomad application, and then it's not a visa, it's going to be residency, right? You cannot apply for a visa in Brazil. So if I had to follow your question, I would limit my answer to the consulate, but just because I know that people usually mix up a visa and residency, I'm gonna, also tell you about the residency timeline. So let's say if you're applying for a digital nomad residency, not a visa, in Brazil, nowadays, once the application is filed, it's being reviewed in average in 45 days, a month and a half. All right, User YT. I've also sent my documents to the NYC consulate at the time of submission 2 weeks ago, right? So you're probably talking, about an application through a consulate, and therefore, yes, it is a visa. User YT, unfortunately, no idea about how long it's taken for, the Brazilian consulate in New York City to review an application. In Houston, which is a consulate we have more contact with, they typically review in between 2 weeks to a month. All right, so that's the timeline generally at the Brazilian consulate in Houston. General Principal, boa tarde, General Principal. Good to see you over here. Boa tarde, Mr. Oliveira. Hope everything is well. The same with you. I have onboarded with your firm for the real estate visa. The YouTube channel was a huge factor in deciding to select your firm's services. I'm so glad that you hear it, and I wish you, a successful and peaceful journey. And we are working every single day, to keep the strong quality of our real estate support services, right? This is probably our main specialty here at the firm. And that's something we've been doing for almost 20 years. And I started this journey, General Principal, just like, to bring some colors to this live stream. I started this journey still as a kid. Like, I would travel with my father, to target properties. He would visit for sometimes, buying and later on selling, right? Like, he was pretty big in terms of dealing with farms in the Goiás, or the center area of Brazil. That's more or less the Goiás center north, right? And he would buy farmers, and he would develop, or better say, sometimes he would buy large tracts of land and do some improvement to the land, and then he would sell. And I would travel with him. I would travel sometimes, like we would just drive. He would drive a car. Sometimes we would travel by bus. Sometimes we would travel by plane. Back then, traveling by plane in Brazil, it was not that common, but, we would still travel by plane. And it was, a really nice time. And that's how I got started. And nowadays, like, we are really, how can I say, we are really, I don't want to address ahead of competitors on that front, but I would say that we have probably, like, the best understanding of real estate transactions when it comes to foreign citizens buying in Brazil. Okay, so I appreciate you as a client. And remember, even though you probably know by now that we have a strong team on the real estate front, I'm always available to participate whenever you feel like in the usual Zoom calls, like status calls that you're going to have during your journey. All right, wishing you all the best, General Principal, and keep coming over here. And you can also ask questions during the live stream. That's not unusual. Some people, like, they work with our team. They, still enjoy the live. They're going to come to the live stream and they're going to ask questions. So this is open to you just as usual, okay? If you want to ask about any specific point of your journey, feel free to ask over here. From our side, there is no no limitation on what you could discuss, right? You are the client. You have, the privilege in terms of communication. From my side, I can comment things in general, and I'm happy to do so for any question that you have. User YT, obrigado. De nada, User YT. When applying, the next step after receiving the visa application receipt was to send my documents, right? The process was a bit confusing in what to do after completing the online form. Yes, for sure. You need to send the whole package, User YT. You need to send the whole package to the consulate so they can review the documents and eventually, decide on your application. Okay. Talking about real estate, we're going to share a little bit about our partners, RE/MAX, Nomad States, RE/MAX, is a real estate agency located in Rio de Janeiro. They are based in Leblon, which is like an iconic neighborhood in south zone of Rio de Janeiro. You can contact them using, WhatsApp. You can use this number on top. That's a WhatsApp number, or you can contact them by email, and then they can help you out, with finding a target property, so you can start your real estate journey in Brazil. All right, let's see what else we have. Okay, looks like we don't have anything right now in the chat window, so let's take something from the backlog. All right, so is it possible for me to have a bank account before getting the R&M card? I understand once I get the R&M card, I can have a bank account just like any other Brazilian. But what if I'm buying a property and I need to pay for things before getting the card? Yes, that's a common need. That's a common situation, right? And what we do, we help our clients open a non-resident bank account. Okay, so yes, the traditional bank account in Brazil is going to require the R&M card, meaning that until you have this card, and I'm not talking about the protocolo, the printout that you get once you are, let's say, once you attend the appointment with Polícia Federal, you kind of get a temporary version. Imagine like a driver license in the United States, right? Like once you pass the exam, typically they give you like a printout that's going to work just like a driver license until you get the real one. And in Brazil, for the R&M card, is somewhat similar. You get a printout version, but unfortunately, banks, they are not going to rely on the printout. They are going to want you to have the R&M card, right? So this whole process, it could easily take several months. And for some of our clients, they are buying the property. They bought the property already, and now they need to pay, like taxes. They need to pay HOA fees. They need to pay for a housekeeper, And so what we do, we get them a non-resident bank account that they can use in the meantime. So in the meantime, they could send, let's say if they're from the United States, they would send some amount of money, let's say $2,000 they send into their non-resident bank account from the United States through a wire transfer. Once the money is received, then they can handle the currency exchange directly with the bank, because this bank specializes in international transactions. And then you're going to have a Brazilian reais into the same account. And with this Brazilian reais, you can use a Pix to pay for pretty much anything, right? This account typically is good for, lower amounts, but not as low as, let's say, Wise, right? Many of you are probably familiar with Wise. Wise works extremely well for amounts under 10,000 US dollars. The non-resident bank accounts, they could, depending on your profile, work, very well for amounts up to 50,000 US dollars. So, meaning if you have the means, you could send 50,000 US dollars, exchange into Brazilian reais and pay whatever you have to pay, right? So that's the strategy we use. We assist the client with sending the money for the purchase, which we do in a different way. And we also help the client to get this non-resident bank account for them to use until they have the residency. Once they have the residency, then it's better for you to go and get a regular bank account, right? First thing, because you are no longer a non-resident, right? If you're no longer a non-resident, meaning you are a resident, you're not supposed to use the non-resident bank account. So that's the first reason. The second one, the non-resident bank accounts, they are more limited in terms of features, right? So, many people, they are, puzzled by the high interest rates or attracted by the high interest rates in Brazil. They say, well, I want to invest, I want to, get some money, some interest, because I heard there is this bank, they're going to pay me 10% interest a year. That's crazy. That's more than double of whatever I could get in the US, right? And this is not going to be typically available at the non-resident bank accounts. They do have some like interest-based applications, but it's very limited. As far as I know, it's going to be one or two types of investments that they are going to allow you to do. So yes, once you have the card, you're better off securing a traditional bank, and then using this traditional bank, you're going to have access to pretty much all types of investment in Brazil, because now you're going to be a resident, right? That's the whole purpose of your journey here with us. All right, let's see what else we have. We have Payson. In your experience when applying on Migrante Web for retirement residency, does the 90-day validity for the criminal background check apply also to the Polícia Federal visit later? Payson, I like the beginning of your question, right? Like it shows a lot of understanding of things, right? Like, I mean, in our experience, because yes, it does vary, it does change from place to place, it does change from, like it does change depending on a series of factors. But in our experience, the main goal for you is to present a background check within the 90 days when you're filing in Brazil, right? And that's what Payson is talking here in terms of Migrante Web. That's the platform made available by the Brazilian government. And as long as you're filing and you have this background check within the 90 days at time of filing, typically you're not going to have an issue down the line, right? So yes, when you attend the appointment with the Brazilian Federal Police down the line, is going to be typically outside of the 90-day time window, okay? And so in our experience, you should not have an issue. All right, Matt again, it's good to see you, Matt and Adrian. Thank you, they're buying me lunch today. So generous of you, Matt and Adrian. Boa tarde, Dr. Oliveira. Boa tarde, both. Besides the birth certificate, what other documents need to be apostilled for a person applying for the retirement visa? So Matt, is going to depend on where you're going to apply. Okay, let's say if you apply in Brazil, which is typically the preferred method for our clients, you're going to need 5 different documents apostilled, right? You're going to need the birth certificate, you're going to need a proof of retirement funds. So let's say if you're relying on Social Security, this is going to be the Social Security letter, or summary of your benefits for the Social Security. Third thing is going to be typically your bank statement. Fourth thing is going to be typically your FBI background check. And the fifth thing is going to be a letter from your bank saying that you are able to wire funds to Brazil, okay? And I'm happy to share this because this is public information, at least like from the Brazilian Federal Police files, right? So it shouldn't be a problem for me to be telling you that. There are nuances, right? Like in many banks, they are not going to want to give you the letter. So there are some strategies that we use to get you something that's going to work with the same value of this letter attesting that you can wire transfer funds to Brazil. All right, Matt. Thank you again for buying me lunch. And we have General Principal. Obrigado, Mr. Oliveira. Obrigado você, General Principal, for your participation with your deep real estate background. Do you have any tips on what to look for or avoid for long-term investment property in Brazil? General Principal, yes, one thing I like to tell you to avoid is buying in places that are not really well known by other foreign citizens, right? Like, I mean, not surprisingly, many foreign citizens, like when they come from the US, from the UK, from the United Arab Emirates, they have a really high purchase power, and they make a lot of difference when you're trying to sell your property, right? So just talking about Rio de Janeiro. So if you are buying Rio de Janeiro, right, and you're concerned about longer-term investment, right? You're also concerned with your point of exit, and you're also concerned with maybe a steady short-term rental income, okay? And the most well-known locations, they are gonna typically perform the better, okay? So Rio de Janeiro, naturally, we're talking about Barra. Nowadays, Barra is becoming, like the hottest spot in Rio de Janeiro. And then you have the two other traditional neighborhoods, which are pretty solid. I would say Leblon and Ipanema, okay? And then, of course, you have so many other good neighborhoods, right? You have Botafogo. Santa Teresa is not for everyone, but I like it a lot. Okay, you can even invest, outside of this, Rio de Janeiro centric universe. Like, you could invest in Búzios, right? Like Búzios is a few hours from Rio de Janeiro itself, but it's a pretty solid market. Cabo Frio, all right? Now, I'm just using Rio as an example, and you can apply this reasoning to any other state or area, right? So we're talking about Rio. Now, when you go to the countryside of Rio de Janeiro, then you start to shrink your base of prospective buyers, right? So when you're talking about Petrópolis, maybe Petrópolis is an exception because pretty much anyone knows about Petrópolis, which is a city in the countryside. But when you start to pick lesser known cities, you start to risk your investment. First off, because even for short-term rental, people are not going to be looking into those locations. And when you try to sell, that's the same reasoning, right? You're not going to have a substantial number of foreign citizens considering buying property in that location. And that's going to typically happen whenever, like the buyer has a Brazilian partner. And the Brazilian partner, naturally, just because the partner is Brazilian, this person is going to know a lot about lesser known places. And for this Brazilian person, it makes a lot of sense. They say, well, this thing here is a steal because price, I don't know, is half of how much you're going to pay in this other location. And the problem is like when you try to exit the, the investment, when you try to sell this property, sometimes you need to take a hit in terms of the amount that you're getting. And when you're doing short-term rentals, like you're not going to enjoy the same level of demand that you're going to enjoy in the most typical neighborhoods in Rio, São Paulo, or any other major Brazilian city, right? That's another tip. Like typically, we recommend our clients, if they are concerned about this type of thing, to stick with the main Brazilian cities and avoid, novelties in terms of locations. All right, I hope that makes sense. Aaron, good to see you, Aaron. Aaron is mentioning, after I renewed my R&M and tried flying out of Brazil, I was delayed at immigration because my R&M, when I entered, didn't match the one I was leaving. Luckily, I had plenty of time to spare. Aaron, yeah, sometimes, particularly at the airports, you have many people who are not really knowledgeable about immigration, right? Very interesting. Like whenever you are entering the United States, you're dealing with border control, very well-trained immigration professionals. Sometimes they are tough. Sometimes, people get aggravated. But most of the time, they have been through, very demanding training, okay? Not necessarily in Brazil. So in Brazil, at the airport, most of the time, you're going to be dealing with people who are not even from the government. You're going to be dealing with outsourced parties, right? And very typical, something that you may have seen, like you're dealing with the person at the counter, and then they are going to look at the documents. They are going to, type a bunch of things on the computer, and eventually they are going to say, "Wait here, I'm going to, go elsewhere." Then they go elsewhere, and then they find someone who knows what they're doing, and then they are going to troubleshoot your issue, right? So that could be a possibility over here, all right? But yes, that's a good point, right? Like, I mean, if you're dealing with immigration, particularly as a resident, first time entering under a certain status, or first time leaving Brazil under a renewed whatever, like document or status, budget time accordingly, so you can, face, peacefully those types of situation without much concern. Nice sharing, Aaron. Moda fala, hello, Mr. Oliveira. This is Mo. Nice to meet you, Mo. Question: after arrival to Brazil, São Paulo, with a digital nomad visa obtained from abroad, how long would it approximately take you to obtain the residency card? Mo, so once you are in Brazil, you're going to need to schedule the appointment with the Brazilian Federal Police. And in São Paulo, this appointment could take, anywhere from a month to a couple of months. And once you attend the appointment, the card is taking usually a couple of months to be issued, right? So let's say if you're going to attend the appointment 2 months after entering São Paulo, in theory, you're going to have a card. You could potentially have a card 4 months after arriving in São Paulo, right? And just like we were talking about the bank account, not ideal because, the account, the bank account, it is something, that really helps in your journey as a foreign citizen residing in Brazil. User YT, I appreciate your response. You're welcome, User YT. Do you know if it is mandatory to make a physical appointment when applying for a digital nomad visa at the consulate? I found conflicting information about this online. It's not mandatory, all right? This is going to change from consulate to consulate. Most of the consulates nowadays, they try to handle the entire procedure remotely, right? Remember that when you're dealing with the consulate, you also need to present a health insurance with coverage in Brazil. And we're talking about health insurance. We're not talking about travel insurance, right? Very common mistake. People assume, all right, they're talking about health insurance, but they probably mean travel insurance. No, we're talking about health insurance. That's a very specific requirement for applications to the consulate. And sometimes we do see, like, someone sends by mistake an application with a travel insurance, and sometimes the immigration officer, they don't know better. They just look at it and they say, what, like, I mean, everything looks the same to me, and they approve. But if you face like a more knowledgeable immigration officer at the consulate, they are going to deny your application. So just point of attention, this is a major distinction between the consulate route and the route of applying directly in Brazil. All right, Samuel Proctor. Tell them about the health insurance they need when moving to Brazil from elsewhere. Look at that, like we connected, Samuel. That's a major point. Yeah, so the health insurance, right? Health insurance, Samuel, and everyone else. Whenever you're dealing with a consulate or embassy abroad, like, Brazil is going to enforce the health insurance requirement, meaning that you're going to need to present health insurance with coverage in Brazil, not, the United States or whatever country you reside in, and it must be good for 12 months, right? Our problem with that route is that if you don't have something that qualify right off the bat, right? For instance, we have many clients from the, who are veterans, right? Like veterans, they typically have a great health insurance, right? That is going to provide coverage worldwide, right? So veterans, whenever they're working with us, they don't have such issue. But most people, they don't have coverage worldwide, right? So if you are in your 50s like me, and if you are applying for health insurance from abroad, I'm not talking about in Brazil, right? If you are in the United States, for instance, and if you try to find a provider that's going to sell you this coverage, it could easily cost a few $1,000s just for the policy alone, right? And in my opinion, like, it's not a recommended path, because these health insurance that you're going to be buying is not going to work, great in Brazil, because it's going to be seen as a kind of foreign policy. So, most of the time you cannot even use. You're going to need to pay for the service in Brazil and then seek a reimbursement against this vendor, right? And once you get to the RNMO card, the good thing about it is that you can buy the same health insurance that I have. Okay, so once you are in Brazil as a legal resident, naturally, right? Like, you don't want to stay in Brazil without coverage, right? So our strategy is, listen, apply in Brazil, skip on the health insurance requirement. Once you get to the card, sometimes even with the protocol, but it's not every single health insurance provider. But once you get the card, like, you have access to the vast majority of the health insurance providers in Brazil, and you can buy a policy that's going to be accepted, like in most places. You're not going to need to pay up front, and cost-wise, as you may imagine, is substantially lower than what you would pay in the United States for a comparable plan, right? So that's very interesting. And if there is a gap in coverage, you could potentially use the public health system in Brazil in the meantime. Not ideal. The Brazil health system in general is like overwhelmed. So many times you go, for service, you arrive in the morning and you're going to, have to spend all day at the hospital until you get service. So not ideal for sure, but what I'm saying is, like, if you have a gap between leaving your country of origin and getting the card and then the coverage by the new Brazilian health insurance, in the meantime, potentially you could use the Brazilian public health system, all right? All right, user YT. Is it necessary to make a physical appointment, though I live within the district? I'm still quite far from the New York consulate. So user YT, like I said, most of the time they don't want you there, right? So I'm not familiar with the procedure for the digital nomad nowadays at the New York City consulate. But I would assume, and again, I'm not telling you that's your answer, but I would assume they would tell you to show up, right? You're not gonna show up out of the blue or booking outside of the process of applying for the digital nomad. We do have clients abroad who hire our services, and then when you hire our services, of course, we troubleshoot all of those issues, right? Like, pursuing answers, communicating with the consulate, and making sure that you're doing everything in accordance with the rules of that specific consulate. Like I said, there is a higher degree of variation in terms of procedures when you're dealing with consulates and embassies abroad. All right, let's take a look at our backlog questions. And in the meantime, please like our live stream if you are enjoying the content. It does help our business, and it helps other people just like you find this content, all right? Next live stream is going to be next Wednesday. We're not going to have a live stream this Sunday. We're going to have 2 live streams on Sundays per month. That's our goal. So we just had one this past Sunday, and I don't know exactly when the next one is going to be within the month of November, but the next one is going to be on November the 19th, next Wednesday. And in the meantime, let's take a look at something from our backlog. All right, so for the União Estável residency, what type of documents I'm going to need to provide to prove that the União Estável is legitimate? All right, so the question here is about the União Estável. Some people are going to translate as civil union. Other people are going to translate as common law marriage, right? Civil union is when you typically get something done at the county. So you go over there, you file, forms, paperwork, and you have a certificate of civil union, meaning you're not married, but you are in a civil union partnership, right? The common law marriage typically has no paperwork. Common law marriage means you're living with someone else, you're behaving like a couple, but there is no paperwork. So law is going to come and say, well, there is no paperwork, but guess what? Because you've been living like this as a couple, we're going to extend protection to the partners based on the common law marriage theory, okay? Now, let's go back to the question, right? União Estável application for residency in Brazil. So the idea here is that if you have a União Estável civil union with a Brazilian partner, you can apply for residency in Brazil. Typically, this residency is going to be very similar to the residency you get when you're married. However, because there has been a lot of abuse by applicants in Brazil, and there was even a major event in July with the Brazilian Federal Police chasing lawyers and applicants who were basically defrauding the Brazilian immigration system. Now this route is facing additional scrutiny, okay? And the idea here is that, the Brazilian immigration system wants to make sure, or you're never sure, but wants to increase the chances that your União Estável is legitimate. And nowadays, what we have here at the firm as requirements, right? And this is typically what is also on the Brazilian Federal Police pages. Like they say, listen, we want to see, a paperwork supporting the União Estável. So in Brazil, you have a deed of União Estável, okay, which you go to a cartório, to a registry, and they get this deed drafted and approved and issued. And by the way, they would ask you for a ton of paperwork, right? Don't think it's just you show up and they are going to get it, get it done. They are going to ask you for a laundry list of documents. Once you provide the laundry list, they're going to schedule a day. So the procedure by itself, it carries a substantial level of red tape in most registries, right? Within the registries, there is also some level of variation, but most registries nowadays, whenever there is a foreign citizen, guess what? Laundry list of documents, all right? But let's say you get the deed of União Estável. Nowadays, because of this increased scrutiny, they're also going to ask you for additional evidence. So typically, just the deed of União Estável is not enough. For our clients, we typically recommend them to get a joint bank account with the Brazilian partner, right, to show that they are sharing financials as a União Estável couple. And we also get a couple of affidavits from friends attesting that the União Estável is legitimate, right? And with those two things, we typically get people approved, right? We are also sharing this heads up that this could change at any time. There is a lot of pressure on immigration frameworks throughout the globe, right? Like to be better prepared to handle the always increasing level of immigration. Okay, and that's something I did discuss with people from the immigration framework in Brazil and outside of Brazil as well. And, like the concepts we have nowadays, many times they go back to 200 years ago, right? 200 years ago, or I don't know, 100 years ago, nobody would ever fly abroad, right? I remember when I was a kid, it was extremely rare for someone to travel abroad. It was almost like an event, right? The family would, have, I don't know, a dinner to celebrate that someone was traveling abroad. Nowadays, we have clients who travel, between Brazil and the US multiple times a month, right? So we live in a very different time of history, and the immigration system is not ready to handle this type of reality, right? So every time we have a new case for União Estável, we just say, listen, we can tell you what we did for our last client. We cannot tell you what's going to happen for your case, right? But we're going to be here to handle whatever comes your way. That's what we can do. And as long as you understand, that things may not work exactly as expected, chances are you're going to get there. Okay? All right. Jeff stories for a PhD student already studying Brazil and wanting to invite her spouse to a family reunion. What documents will she need to notarize at the cartório? Right, so for the family reunion, Jeff, there are two tracks as well. One track is the visa, right, meaning that she is going to apply from abroad through a consulate. There is another route, which is to apply in Brazil. Once she arrives in Brazil, and then she's going to apply for a family reunion residency. Okay, if you're applying abroad, let's say in the United States, then we're talking about family reunion visa. If you're applying in Brazil, then we're talking about family reunion residency. For applications through the consulate, you basically have a list that is going to be provided by the specific consulate in which you are applying. Okay, so nowadays, if you take a look at a list, let's say from the Brazilian consulate in Houston and the Brazilian consulate in Los Angeles, most of the documents there are going to be the same, but you may see some variation in terms of the document. So my recommendation is, if you are applying through a consulate, the first thing is to pinpoint which consulate is responsible for your jurisdiction. Okay, you cannot just decide which consulate to pick. Once you know the consulate in charge, then you're going to access the list of documents. And, if we're talking specifically about the V1011 as family reunion visa, they do have a list. So my recommendation is to work on those documents first, and also understand that sometimes they are going to ask you for additional stuff. Okay, so that's something you can do. Typically, people are going to access the page. Sometimes they don't find the content. They find it, but they don't understand, right? And you have two choices, right? One is like you learn all of that by yourself, or you hire someone to, file the application on your behalf, Jeff. Mo, thank you, Ms. Oliveira. As a digital nomad, I'm planning to visit other cities. Do I have to remain in São Paulo to federal police appointment? Will this process take shorter time if I apply in Florianópolis? So, Mo, that's a very interesting question, and there is going to be an anchor that's going to narrow your choices in terms of where you're going to attend the federal police appointment, and this anchor is going to be proof of address. Okay, so typically when you attend the federal police appointment, they are going to want to see a solid proof of address. All right, so if you enter São Paulo, but you want to have a federal police appointment in Florianópolis, guess what? You're gonna have to present a proof of address in Florianópolis, and as long as you have such document, you would be free to attend an appointment in Florianopolis, all right? There is also some variation in terms of the requirements. Some Brazilian Federal Police stations, they are going to accept, for instance, if you have like the automatic letter issued by Airbnb, if you have that document translated, right? Many times, the federal police officer, they are going to accept. Nowadays, for our clients, we always have a letter signed by the owner of the property saying, listen, this person is staying at my property, right? And we get this letter notarized. It is somewhat easy for us to get, right? Particularly if you're renting the property for a couple of months. The landlord is hoping that you continue to stay at the location, so they are typically fine with providing the letter, right? But in our standard procedures nowadays, we get a letter drafted, and we have this letter signed and notarized by the owner of the property, and this is fully compliant no matter where you are attending the federal police appointment. All right, Jeff Stories, thank you. Thank you for showing up, Jeff. Thank you for being with us. And let me see if we have anything else. It looks like we don't have anything else. And I want to say thank you for all of you for participating today. Very interesting comments. And remember to participate in our next live stream, which is going to be on November 19. Maybe sharing here for those of you who are interested in knowing more about Brazilian real estate. We have this partnership with Remax Nomad States. They try to follow standards closer to what we do. We try to educate them in terms of the properties that are suitable for foreign citizens and those that are not. And they do a good job. Many times you're gonna see people here in the live stream who are using their services, and they are gonna express satisfaction with their services. And again, thank you all for participating, and wishing you guys a blessed rest of your Wednesday.